How's everyone doing? What's been the highlight of Bild so far? Shout it out. Was it a person, a brand, anyone? Expo itself, very true. What else? What were your highlights? The speakers. Which speakers? Let's hear some names. Who was it? Amy Vitale, yes, very good. Art Wolf, oh, super big highlight. What else? Frank Smith, very impressive. Andy Mann, yesterday, that was super exciting. Very good talk. Well, thank you guys for sharing. You know, this wouldn't happen if you guys weren't here in the audience. So we are super honored not only to host this, but to host you guys and have all these brands show up and all these speakers put their hearts and soul into bringing back the community to New York. So let's hear a round of applause for the New Yorkers here. So you guys are in for a treat. This man needs no introduction. He has been a staple at B&H for decades, maybe. Event space, our optic shows, Optic West. It's been such a highlight, and we're so super honored to celebrate our inaugural Bild with Vincent Versace. Take the stage.
Thank you. I'll need it. Oh. Welcome. Okay. We know where the DMZ is, right? So, how many of you all are into infrared? Okay. What I'm going to show you in this presentation is I've been working on a project for about 20 years. And these are the images in culmination, or not culmination, but these are the images where I'm at now of this project. I'm in the process of applying for a whole bunch of fancy grants to continue it. And the project is titled Turning the Last Page. And it is going to be about being shot in infrared. And so what I want to talk about, and I've made a discovery to which when we get to that part, that's the reason why I asked if you're into infrared, of the description of the presentation, I will give you the action that solves one of the greatest dilemmas. If you're an infrared photographer, there is. I will solve all of your problems. Wow. All right. So let's start with a couple of quotes because it wouldn't be me if it wasn't quotes. One, and this applies to all photography. It's something that Albert Einstein said, which is, when I examine myself and my methods of thought, I have come to the conclusion that the gift of fantasy has meant more to me than my talent for observing positive knowledge. I invite you to daydream. Well, okay then. I invite you to daydream. I invite you to let feats of fancy take you to places that you don't think are possible, because it is from It is from the impossible possible comes. And the only person that thinks something is impossible is you, sitting in the same seat you are. Next, and this is the basis of this idea, Win Bullock. And to get to the bottom of it, his goal was to take the invisible and make it eye visible. And one of the joys with working in the infrared spectrum is you are looking at things that you don't see. You can look right at it and see it, but there is yet more to see beyond it. There we go. This is the sweet spot. Than just what we see with our eye. That there is more to experience to it, and there is a sense of timelessness that exists that I think is incredibly important to bear in mind. So let's take a look at looking at what you cannot see. So what would you say about this photograph? And you can be honest. Bit of a yawn. This is it shot in infrared. And this is it when it's converted to black and white. These are all the things that you can't see. Look at this woman with her tattoos. You cannot see them in her face. But yet, when I photograph her in infrared, and this is not converted, and then when I convert her into infrared, see how much more powerful the image is. That there are things that we cannot see, like here. This is not the most exciting photograph. And yet, all of that detail is in the clouds because of the nature of the way in which infrared works. Because water blocks it and water lets it through. Or this here, this woman just, going for roots. And what I get to see is an entire world that I can look at but not see. And one of the powers of digital photography is our ability to be able to capture the unseen. Same camera, same lens, two completely different photographs. Same camera, same lens, one infrared, one visible spectrum. Same camera, same lens, two different photographs. Now, there are many, many, many wonderful things about it. So if you have an old camera, convert it to infrared. Why? Because you get to see a world that is kept from you, that you get to experience a world in which is even greater than what we experience now, that we get to be moved. Now, for me, my work is about, I get to play with things. Look at this lovely girl. The difference on her quinceañera in the way in which infrared allows me to see something that is held just before I'm allowed to see it. That is right before human vision. Now, what is unique about infrared is that it is both light and not light at the same time. It acts like light and it doesn't act like light at the same time. So, Einstein said, what is light quanta? In all the 50 years that he's been studying it, he hasn't a clue. So if Einstein doesn't know what it is, what makes us know? We know some things about it, and one of the things that we know about it is what are the most common ways to produce light? Most common way to produce light is we use something hot. Hot things make light. That's called a black body response. Now, this is what a digital sensor sees, and I want you to pay attention to this. You see where the visible light and then into the infrared? A digital sensor actually sees almost twice as much into the infrared as it does into the visible spectrum. So the visible spectrum is limited to the spectral range between 30 nanometers and 780 nanometers, whereas infrared starts at 650 and goes all the way up to 1500 nanometers, and a sensor can see into 1200 nanometers. Which means you have more infrared than you have visible spectrum. It's actually more infrared radiation than there is visible spectrum. I want you to hold this because this is the solution to the biggest problem you have if you've decided to go into infrared. And did I mention I solved it? Did I? Did I mention that not only did I solve it, but I'm going to solve all your problems? Okay. Again, let's look at the entire electromagnetic spectrum. See how small visible spectrum is? See how big infrared is? There's a lot more there. You actually put a filter in front of the sensor to clip everything so that you just see this tiny little wavelength. You can't do this in film, but you can do this in digital. You can take that sensor out and put in a whole different sensor. And if you shoot mirrorless, you can focus off the sensor, which means that all your infrared pictures will be in focus. That's the power of mirrorless versus DSLR. I'm going to get to the inspirational stuff first, or soon. I have to get through all this to make sure we're on the same page. Now, more than half of the energy that hits the Earth is IR. Color is reflected light. This is an important thing to keep in mind with regard to whether it's visible spectrum or not. Light picks up the color of the surface that it reflects off of. Light assumes that color. So if you hit it off of a green wall, it will assume green. If you hit it off a red wall, it will assume red. Color is affected by the light source. The type of light source will define how the color is made or what the color appears to be. atmosphere will affect the way we see color. For example, what color is the sun? It's white, but what do we see it as? Why do we see it that way? Because it's coming through the atmosphere, and the atmosphere scatters it in such a way that it appears to be yellow. And at sunset, it appears to be red because it's coming through the thickest part of the atmosphere, and the nitrogen molecule scatters it and all sorts of stuff. All right, so here's the issues as I see it. One, light exhibits the properties of both being a particle and a wave. This matters for infrared. Sometimes it responds like a particle, sometimes it responds like a wave. With infrared, it has all of those properties, plus it is radiation, it is energy, so it responds differently. And that is where we do ourselves in. Now, that also means that it's neither one, it's something else. We just don't know what it is, but we see that it does this and we see that it does that. It is our complete lack of understanding that makes us do nothing but educated guesses. So I'm going to use that as my, if I screw up and say something wrong, well, it's because it's an educated guess. Einstein said I could say that. Okay, so lastly, I will admit that I know absolutely nothing about what I'm talking about. All I know is a lot of facts that I hope come together to make a knowledge beach. And if I say something incorrect that you know, do me a favor. Instead of telling me I'm an idiot, let's have a conversation about it and send me an email or in comments tell me why. I've spent 20 plus years studying this, and in all honesty, ain't any closer. But these are the things that I have observed, and these are the things that I know. So, sunlight moves an inch every 2 minutes. Another thing to keep in mind when you're taking pictures. If you want to find that out, take a quarter, put it next to a shadow, and you watch the shadow, because a quarter is about an inch, either be lit, if it's on the inside of the shadow, or be covered by the shadow. This changes the way you perceive how you're going to shoot. Worth the price of admission even if you don't give a, I was going to say something untoward. Insert whatever expletive that you want to put there about infrared. But light travels an inch every 2 minutes. Light is both ambient and directional at the same time. This also has impact for both IR and visible spectrum. That means that when you want to light a portrait, you light into a shadow. You put the person in the shadow, and all of a sudden they're filled. And if you want to get real fancy, concrete or black asphalt are the best organic reflectors there are because they're neutral and they bounce light in. It is more accurate to say that light is moving in a forward direction than it is to say that light travels in a straight line. How many of you heard that light travels in a straight line? You've been lied to. Not according to Einstein. Light bends. And when light hits this is a forward direction, and it hits this surface, and it comes back this way, and when it collides with that, it goes like this, and when it collides with that, it goes like this. I'm still moving in a forward direction. I'm just not moving in a straight line. When it comes down the barrel of your lens, it's flipped, turned down, sped up, slowed down, depending on the shape of the glass and the density of the glass and the types of coating that are on the glass. So that light moves in a forward direction. It does not necessarily move in a straight line. And that has incredible amounts of implications about how one conceives and perceives light. Okay, so let's compare visible spectrum images. Better yet, how many people do infrared? What happens if I tell you I've solved the problem of hotspots? What happens if I tell you I've created an action? What happens if I tell you, I sound like Popeil, I'm Ron Popeil here. What happens if not only if I say that, but I will give you the action? Because I'm such a nice guy. There's only one requirement. You have to sign up to Instagram and give me your email address to send it to you. That's how I get you to sign up for Instagram. Because as we know, the center of the universe is Instagram, right? All right, so let's look at hotspots. The first one is what it looks like coming straight off the camera. Okay, so you see that? It's red. Can you tell anything about it? Yeah, it's red. So we have to white balance it. And when I white balance it, what happens? There's a hotspot. I want you to observe that hotspot and look at it, and I want you, without saying anything, what is it that you observe? My first question is it hot? And then to the right, that's the final processed image, where the hotspot is made to go away, and that's the way I want it to look. Okay, let's look at this even closer. This is a hotspot. This is what people refer to as a hotspot. They tend to occur at the widest angle from 24 to 50, thereabouts. That's where their tendencies are. One of the rules of shooting infrared is to always shoot wide open. Don't stop your lens down. What, you say? Is this Groundhog Day? Yeah. Don't stop your lens down. Shoot wide open. There are many reasons for this. If you stop your lens down, you're going to start creating diffraction and refraction problems and all sorts of other stuff. You're also going to focus that hot spot. That's a hot spot close up. These are hot spots. You're looking at wide open all the way down to f22. Do you see what's happened? I've tightened that hot spot. So what do I not want to do? That. Now, what I'm about to say is, I haven't completely proven it yet, but this is a fairly good observation. Actually, all lenses, every lens, hot spots. What happens is that the area of the hot spot exceeds this area, and when you white balance it, you white balance it out. Where the problem occurs is when you're wide angle and the hot spot's closer on the inside than it is on the outside. That's an observation. The next observation, and this is going to be streamed and then put up on the interwebs? Yes? Okay. So you don't have to take pictures of this. You can come and back and look at that. So, what are the causes? Lenses. Yes, lenses can cause hotspots. What causes hotspots in lenses? Aperture. Yes, as we've seen, the aperture can define a hotspot. Focal length. Yes, it can. Wide-angle lenses tend to have a bit more hot spotting than when they're telephotoed out. 2, point of focus. Not so much. More that matters is what you're focusing on. If it's backlit with clouds, it tends to hot spot more than if it's not. Lens angle relative to light source. It may not. There's no proof on that. Intensity of light, yes. The intensity of light can cause a lens to hotspot. What's that last one say? The sensor. And in all my research, and in all of the time that I've spent, not once has that ever been discussed as a culprit. I made the same face you did, young lady. The same exact face. The sensor. So let's talk about the sensor. Let's go back to, this is the sensor. Sensor has a sheen on it. It has a coating. And it has to do with something called a Bayer array. It's red, green, red, green, red, green, blue, green, blue, green, blue, green, red, green, red, green, red, green. There's twice as much green as there is red and blue. So how do we get red, green, and blue? Pardon? Sensors in the red that we're matching. So sensors in it, how do we get that red? How do we get that green? What do we use to get that? A filter? So everybody thinks there's a filter involved? Is it a pigmented filter? Makes sense, right? No. Therein lies the issue. First issue is an issue of vocabulary, which I invite you to consider. This is not just a lesson of me going off on how dweeby I can get, and I can get pretty dweeby. This is a lesson on how to consider changing the way you take knowledge in. That hotspot isn't hot, it's blue. And yet you can look at it, and because everybody calls it a hotspot, you accept that that's indeed what it is, but it is not. It is blue. All right? 1. 2, well, there's a filter in front of the pixel site. Well, that filter's obviously what? Well, it's a pigmented filter. You can't make a pigmented filter that small. You can't get it as uniform as you want. So what they use is dichroic glass. How do they get dichroic glass to be red, green, and blue? Thickness. Hold that. Herein lies the problem. Did I mention that there was twice as much infrared radiation in that sensor box as there is visible spectrum? I did mention that. Okay, this is where a series of unrelated facts started to collide. And this is what I invite you to consider and to think is, don't make facts be islands. Make facts become grains of knowledge in which you can create an epiphany beach. Shut up. You can watch it, you can rewind it. Okay. Don't make knowledge islands. Make knowledge as grains of knowledge that you can make an epiphany beach. Did I get that right? I got that right. Okay. So these started collecting. Then I remember somebody talking about making a monochromatic sensor, and how they do that is they grind off the Bayer array. Okay. Then I started looking at the image, and I looked at the red channel, I looked at the green channel. There's no problem with it. But when I look at the blue channel, there is. What is happening in the sensor, back to our visible spectrum, twice as much energy, what is happening to our sensor, and this is how it works, red, green, blue, you get red, green, and blue, which is then blended together to create a color image. What is happening into our sensor, and we can skip over all of this, because the thing I want you to keep in mind looking at this is what matters in infrared is resolution. The more resolution you have, the better your infrared will be. And the reason for that is when you take the dark mirror away and you get rid of that, and you put in the dark mirror for infrared, you convert your green channel to luminance. So you lose half of the effective change in the green channel. So if it was a 36 megapixel camera, it would in fact become a 22 megapixel camera, but with 36 megapixels worth of headroom. So the more resolution you have, the better off you are. And the reason for that is because the greatest change in all of this occurs in the green, the red, and the blue channels. And backside illumination sensors, which are what we're at today, are better than front side. Now, what I want you to pay attention to is the bottom diagram. I'm going to blow that up. Do you see that as I get past 700 nanometers, red, blue, and green become the same? So the informational change occurs in the red and the blue, but the green diminishes. Green is just luminance. Your changes are in red and blue. So let's go back to our hotspot. It's actually blue cyan. Do you see that it's blue cyan? Now that we've mentioned it, did it cease being hot, but it's blue? Okay. The reason for that, let's look at a sensor. There's the blue sensor, there's the red sensor. Remember I said that dichroic glass is the reason why this occurs, and how you get this is through the thickness of the glass. Which one is thicker, the red one or the blue one? Red. So red does its job. Green does its job. Blue, however, is the thinnest, and what's happening, because there's twice as much information in that sensor box, the blue sensor is getting overwhelmed. So what's occurring at a wide angle is you are overwhelmed the blue sensor. And that's what tends to cause, in my current observation, hotspots. Now those that shoot infrared Has that piqued something, some interest there? Have I hit an aha moment? Got $1? Yes?
Are we putting any kind of nanometer filter?
Mm-hmm.
What's the way?
720.
Okay.
I also do 665, but that was 720. Now, ready? Let's see if this works. Yeah. That's how fast it's going to take. Right. This is step by step. It takes, with the action, without me slowing it down, it takes 12 seconds to remove a hotspot. I set this down to 1 second worth of time so you can see how many steps are involved in removing the hotspot. The issue with it is, there you go, gone. I'll give this to you in about 5 days because I have one more tweak to it that I have to make. So that is how you, it's still powering on. But it takes 12 seconds if you run it without me putting in a delay, and so you can see all the steps. So what I have done, and it has to do with something that Adobe Photoshop did with their latest version in the beta. They came up with something called a radial gradient tool. And because I can now match it, I can get rid of it. The reason why you want to shoot wide open is because you now have a constant. What do you always know? What that blur ring will be. So if I do that, it's predictable. If I do that and I shoot that, the amount of saturation, desaturation in the blue and cyan will be the same. There you go, it's done. The thing that I have to adjust is the final darkness. Now, take a picture of that, send me your email, and I will send you an action. Is that fair enough? Yes, ma'am.
Anything to do with a sort of a color cast?
Well, color cast's a whole other different thing, okay? This is about hotspots and what causes them with this. It's a color, it's blue cyan. So yes, is it a color cast? Yeah, it is a color cast. It's affected by the blue cyan, but wait, now that we have that, okay, let's take a look at a conversation about why I shoot infrared and why I'm in the pursuit of photographing that which it is that I can look at but can't see. I look at this man's face every day. And when I took his picture, I took it at B&H, and he said, you know, are you going to do good? And I said, yes, one snap with an infrared camera in the coat room. And I've held that as my mantra. And what I want to do in my work, particularly this project, is I want to make it so that when you see these things, what you see are moments that we're losing, moments that are becoming very fleeting. Because of the way the world is and what is going on within our world, we are losing that which is most precious to our humanity and that which is most precious to our spirit. I want to create photographs that are timeless and that remind us of not what or where, but try to give us a moment of when. When was this shot? I remember when the world was like this, so that what we can do is help preserve a world that we all want to be in. Now, each and every one of you possesses a superpower. You have a camera, that's your magic pixel saver, and you possess the superpower of having the ability to stop time. Okay? There's argument, is the past something that you can visit? Does the past still exist? It exists there. It will always exist there. It will never ever not be there because I was there present and I recorded a moment of it. And I can record a moment of it in which I can show you. in which you can look at and you can experience. And not only can I show it to you and you can experience it, but I can make it so that we all experience it in exactly the same way. And I can make it so that it's as if you're standing in the same place I was when that moment happened. And most importantly, I can show you something that none of us can see. We can't see this, but it exists. And the echo of this is incredibly powerful. The way that these images are recorded because of the way in which infrared reflects off of things, the way in which it is both light and not light, that it is not heat but the outcome of heat, that I can take the invisible and I can make it so that it is visible for all of us. That I can see this, I can capture this, I can get the spirit of the person, I can get, for example, this photograph, that was just whiteout. But you can see the texture and the detail, the castle in the back, or the reflection off the Guggenheim, or the last living war chief's hands. He was 106 when I photographed this picture. Things that you simply cannot see, but we can feel. I can create a photograph in which we can see and feel. And you can do that. And you have the tool in which can do that. I'm not trying to be an advertisement for infrared. I can tell you why it's a good idea to have one. Have you ever been outside in a day? Well, like today. You know what we call this light in my world? Craptastic. This is craptastic light. Oh God, there's nothing like really contrasty, bald sky. Oh my God, not only am I going to melt, but everything around me is melting light. That light, we're familiar with it. Would you like to know what infrared's favorite light is? Craptastic light. And this is how I got started with it, was because I was just tired of going, well, that's great. My pores are clean. How do I know? Because I'm going to wring my shirt out. And so I just started shooting these things. I photographed this the day my father was buried at Arlington. And I have it in visible spectrum, I have it in infrared, but I think infrared makes a statement about what this felt like, right? And what I try to do is I try to put into my images the sensation of smell and feeling. I believe you can do it. Somehow that guides your hand. In that moment of watching the slow fold of the flag and the 21-gun salute and I mean that, you know. But the point being is that these are moments that are wholly unique. When? Infrared has the ability to create a when. I have no idea when. I get the drama. I get what it's like to be out there, and I get to feel moments as I remembered them when I fell in love with photography. And that is what infrared is for me. That's what this is. And if you have an old camera, convert it. Yeah, you're going to void the warranty. Okay? Trust me, I did that with a Z9. Nothing more sobering. Okay? Did that with a Z8. Again, nothing more sobering than knowing that you have just made it so that Nikon's going to go, I don't care what level of ambassador you are, Sparky. Okay. The answer there is no, pal. I'd rather work on gray market than this. This ain't happening. But what it gives you is it gives you this just image that it's worth playing with. You can rent them. You know, go to borrowedlenses.com, rent it for a week and play with it. Because I remember the first time I did infrared, I looked at Minor White's work and oh my God, I was absolutely blown away. I was 13 years old. I saved up all my money, $50, bought a roll of film, developed it, didn't get one picture. Okay, so at 13 years old, how many more times do you think I'm going to do that? You know, no. And it wasn't until digital that I took an old camera, broke it, went up to Vermont, shot it in a snowstorm, looked at the pictures and went, well, add a 0 to that 50, threw it in my camera bag. Went to Myanmar, and then noticed that Myanmar has a lot of heat and a lot of green and a lot of moisture. And I was on a job, and I had to remind myself to shoot color because they were paying for color, not me going, whoa! Oh my, oh, wow! So if you're looking for ways to expand the way in which you see, which I invite you to consider, and if you're looking for ways in which to become greater than you think you are, consider this thought. Shoot your landscapes like portraits, shoot your portraits like landscapes. If you don't do one, and you only do the other, guess what your new best friend is? So if all you do is landscapes and you don't like to shoot people, congratulations, your new best friend is shooting people. And why do I say shoot your landscapes like portraits and your portraits like landscapes? Because when I take a portrait, my job is to tell the totality of that person's story in one picture. That would be a landscape, wouldn't it? And when I'm taking a picture of mountains and hills, I'm doing the portrait of the flower or the portrait of the mountains. So the two cross-pollinate. And what infrared has shown me is ability to frame and compose and to see things and think in a way in which I didn't until then. We get a little reliant on the technology. Like the light meter is always going to be right. Not in infrared. Light meter is just kind of where you start. You take a picture and go, well, that's blown out. What do you know? Let's back that down. Why? Because the light meter is balanced for visible spectrum. It's not balanced for infrared. Well, if it's green, it'll photograph white. No, it won't. Chlorophyll, ammophil, and xylophil will, but green paint doesn't. Oh, look at that person with black hair. Why is it purple? They dye it. Oh my God, look at that black shirt from Columbia Wear. Why, how did that get white? Because it reflects infrared. So it starts to force you to see the world in a way in which you just walk by, that you take for granted, that you don't think about. And it gives you another avenue to expand your creativity. Creativity comes from the same place. It's just the metaphor you choose to express it. And I invite you to choose as many metaphors to express your creativity as possible. One of the things, when I went to grad school, I was blessed with having a next-door dorm mate in graduate housing who was going to USC to study music. He wanted to be a conductor and a composer. And his name was Mark Clegg. He's now the head of the Department of Music at University of Michigan. And he said to me, because he's studying bassoon. Bassoon? Really? There are a lot of other cooler instruments than the bassoon. I played trumpet. And I said, why? Why am I playing bassoon? Because I like it. But he could play every instrument in the symphony at the level to sit in the symphony. And I said, well, why did you do that? He says, I am a master musician. My instrument is the symphony. So I want to master everything. What do I like? I like playing the bassoon. There's that one song, Tears of a Clown, it's great. Okay, that's what he fell in love with. But what stuck with me is I am a master photographer. That's what I want to be. And when people say, well, what genre of photographs do you take? Photography. Well, I mean, I do everything. Now, am I better at some things than other things? Yes, and whenever I find something that I'm not good at, congratulations, my new best friend. I'm at least good enough to do it, to make a living at it. There are some things I'm better at than others, but I want to know how everything works. Because one of the things that I also invite you to become are know-it-alls. Give a bunch of geeks that permission, it's like, yeah, baby. No, and what I mean is this, the more you know about how it all works, the more informed your decisions can be at point of capture. You want to know everything there is to know about everything there is to know so that you don't have to think about it when you're doing it. You can enter into this almost grace-like state called shibumi in Zen Buddhism, which is thoughtful, thoughtless thought. I want you to be able to pick up that camera and go, click, oh, hold on, click. One eye closed, haha, cheating, click. To understand it to the point where you're not doing this. Hold on one second. Expletive, expletive, expletive. Really bad expletive. Gremlins expletive. Don't one. Okay, smile. Oh, okay, be happy now. Okay, no, okay? You need to be able to pick that camera up, click, 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 and drop that camera down, and somebody goes, did somebody take my picture? Why, no. So that's what I'm inviting you to. And does it get back to this? Yeah, I have the most amount of fun shooting infrared I never thought I was going to have. And I invite you to consider it. I invite you to play with it. I invite you to look at it, because what it has done for me is it's made my visible spectrum photography way better. I've had so many epiphanies about creating content and about seeing and understanding what light does, because we take light for granted. Why? Because we see it. Okay? Just like when you look in the mirror, you can do this. Oh my God, my one eye is 5 feet lower than the other. Oh my God, that zit's going to be Mount Vesuvius. Ah! Nobody else sees it. Okay? So what this does for me is it allows me to go past that which it is that I have come to take for granted and see that which it is that has been invisible to me and becomes eye visible, as Win Bullock would put it. And Win Bullock is one of my heroes. He's one of my idols. And when I read that quote, it was like, dang, what he said. So open yourself up to experiment, open yourself up to play, open yourself up to know everything there is to know about everything there is to know. You don't want to be like one of those know-it-alls, like you don't want to do it that way. You want to be able to know everything so that you don't get into task oversaturation. Most fighter pilots, why they crash planes is because they're in task oversaturation. Too many things are hitting them at once, and they crashed a plane. You have the ability to do about 6 or 7 things consciously. You have the ability to do hundreds of things slightly unconsciously. It is the unconscious mind, the unconscious eye that you want to be able to access, the one that maintains everything that's going on, and when something starts to look like it's about to become dangerous, pops into your awareness, excuse me, Sparky, address this, then goes back down. So you can pay attention to what is important. What is important is what is in front of your camera. What is mostly important is how what is in front of your camera takes you. You don't take pictures. You should be taken by your pictures. Biggest lesson I ever learned in my life was that the journey of a photograph is not me going like this. The journey of a photograph is the sensation of being pulled through the lens and being ripped out of that picture and firing the shutter as I'm being taken. I invite you to consider being taken by pictures. I invite you to expand every aspect of photography that you can. I invite you to see all the things to see, including the things you can't see. Because my goal with this little thing, which started as I have an old camera, I got to do something with it. It's out of warranty. Okay, let's do that. Well, you really broke it. Is going to turn into a project that's going to be a series of books that's going to record the world. Who knows where it takes you? Who knows? And that's the inspirational part of this journey, plus the technical part. And do remember, if you follow me on Facebook and send me a notation, I will send you the action. I'm this close to solving it. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm looking at this clock. I landed this plane. Any questions, since I have some time? Ma'am.
I'd love to hear your take on actions that claim to make photos into infrared photos.
You can't make it, you can't do it. Okay, you can't do it. It's horse pucky. Oh, I found a way to say something. It's fertilizer. I can turn something red, I can turn red white, or green white, but when I turn green white, that makes red black. Okay? You can't replicate the physics of this. You really do need a modified camera or a filter in front of it. The best way to go is a modified mirrorless camera. You can't. Well, you can, I guess. You shouldn't. How's that? Ma'am.
You said that it would be better to use a mirrorless camera to convert. I assume that has to do with the reflection of the mirror changing things or not?
Nope. The question is, You recommended a mirrorless camera over a DSLR. Did that have something to do with the mirror? No. What it has to do is that infrared focuses at a different point than visible spectrum. If you look at a lens on old cameras, they had a little red dot. That red dot was where you would move it to focus for infrared. Since you're focusing off the sensor, okay, the autofocus system is making its decision off of what's going on the sensor. So that's good. Now here's another thing to keep in mind. The further the object is from the camera, even if I am focused on the subject, it will be softer than if you were closer. This has to do with atmosphere and the way light moves and stuff. I don't know all the reasons for it. I just know that over 20-some years I've observed it, and what I've observed is the further I am from the subject, even if I'm zoomed in on it, the slightly softer it will be if I'm closer to the subject. 1, 2, 3. 1.
So I have a thought. The blue dichroic glass is thinner
Yes.
because blue transmits more difficult, right? So you think about it from video terms, blue channels are always difficult. So
Right.
blue dichroic thinner let more light through, right? In
Right.
order to compensate for the wavelength differences in red and green. So the demosaic algorithm is compensating for that amount of light there. That could potentially be the problem with blue channel.
Well, it's the blue sensor's overwhelmed, so it's got more data, okay? So that's what the problem is in the blue. The issue is that red's fine, green's fine, but blue isn't. Why? Twice as much data than red and green. It's the blue. Most likely culprit is the fact that the blue glass is thin and there's more information hitting it. It may very well be that. Don't have an answer for that. I do know that that's what a sensor does. And when I'm in the process of your mission, should you decide to accept it, young man, find that. See if I...
Gonna get some feedback on that.
No, you want to know what this was? This was, I have progressive lenses. And all of a sudden, that went like this, and then went like that, and I didn't know where it was. Let's just move over here. That's what that sound was. It was a force field to keep me out of that. You're 4, she's 3, you're 2. I set my camera to monochrome, so what I see, and the reason why I do that is so that I can figure out what I'm doing, otherwise it'd be red. I see what I'm going to get. Okay? I shoot raw and I'm going to process it differently. I just put it in monochrome because it's a lot easier to figure out what the hell's going on. What the heck is going on? Channeling my inner sailor. What the heck is going on that way. But shoot raw, convert to red, white balance in the camera manufacturer's raw processor because you'll get a better processed file in infrared. I have done every nanometer there is, every conversion there is. Okay, the really high ones, the deep black, the standard IR and all that, not my first choice. I was going to say another untoward thing, but 665, 720 are the ones that I like to work in. And the reason why I like to work in those is that they bleed a little bit of visible spectrum light in, and that bleed causes a sharper image with a little bit more detail into the image. It's an aesthetic choice. People I tend to shoot at 665, nature I tend to shoot at 720. Now the beauty of mirrorless is if you go to the Nikon booth, no, I can't say go to the Nikon booth tomorrow, we're not here. Never mind, I didn't bring my camera. But what I have is magnetic filters that clip on the inside of the sensor, so everything happens at the back of the lens. So I can swap it out, I can make the camera visible spectrum, I can make it 620 or 720, 665. I can make it anything I want. So Kalari Vision did that for me. They use a shot glass for their filters, which is the equivalent quality of glass that I use, which are Nikkor lenses. Remember this about a lens. It's the first element that defines what happens to that lens. So if you put crappy glass in front of your fancy lens, you're going to have bad images. So I'm at the end of this journey. So whatever's going to happen has happened. And since we're talking, everything is seated up like that, it just goes straight through, and I get the sharpest, best conversion. The best conversions are the ones that are either you have the sensor converted, or you have full spectrum where you have interchangeable filters at the back of it. And so that's what I have found, having converted every possible camera there is. Does that answer your question, ma'am? 4.
So when you're shooting in IR, like, are there any optimal settings that you have for your camera to shoot in? Like, because there's certain settings that, like, maybe like the way that like the shutter is, it lets in too much light or too little light or things like that.
Wide open, never deviate from that. Okay? Wide open. 1. That's my absolute. It's my only absolute. What I do is I take a picture and I chimp. I hit the button and I see what's on the back of the screen. And then from that I can determine, do I need to open it up or close it down? And the reason for that is, if I have a lot of green, what's going to happen is that sensor is going to be thrown off because the light meter is balanced for visible spectrum. The light meter is not balanced for infrared. So it sees green as green. So it will be darker, therefore lighter. So what I do is, you have to call an audible, and it's using the plus or minus correction. Keep going. Go on.
Question for you. Looking at your really nice images up there, I love them. Do you carry with you in the field, like this image I'm seeing on the screen, where you're obviously in the front country possibly, do you carry 2 cameras with you?
Yes.
Infrared and color?
Do I carry 2 cameras with me? I always walk with 2 cameras. One is visible spectrum, one is infrared. And I shoot everything, visible spectrum and infrared. And what I've learned is, I have no idea what's going to work, visible spectrum and infrared, but you don't need to know that. What you need to know is, oh my God, you are so amazing. Your pictures are just so spot on. Everyone's a keeper. God, I wish I could do that. Sure. I shot 32,000 frames when I was in Cuba last, of which I produced 100 pictures. I had better have 100 keepers out of that, right? It's a numbers game, okay? And you don't know. And why not? You spent the money, right? Here, look at it this way, all right? You bought it. If you shoot only 1 picture with your Z9, with your fancy 24 to 120 lens, that means you spent for that 1 picture. How much did that 1 picture cost you? $9,000. Well, $7,000. But if I shot 32,000 frames, how much did that each individual frame cost? Huh? 29 cents. Thank you very much. Okay? So the ROI is greater. Therefore, you can tell your spouse you can afford to buy another camera, you can buy another lens, because you are saving money by shooting more. Hoorah! Let me know if that works. Hasn't worked for me, but I would love to know. Am I getting the hook? I'm getting the hook. All right. Vincent_Versace in Instagram. So my name _ my last name. Because I don't know. They're about to kick me out.
One more time, let's have a round of applause for Vincent, everybody. Great job.